The Joe Rogan Experience.
Well, that's the craziest thing about 1883 is that you don't have to do any dramatic embellishment. Doesn't have to be any fucking with the truth. That is literally what went down. Those people literally came here. You were telling me on the phone that what percentage of the people that made the trek across couldn't even speak English?
Something like 40%. They used to come in from, they would come into, and of course what our government was doing was we needed people for a multitude of reasons after the Civil War. So many of the workforce had been killed, 1 point something million soldiers died that we know of. We don't know how many other civilians. So we needed people. We needed people to settle the West because Manifest Destiny basically said, hey, there's all this land we bought from whoever we bought it from, France, I guess, the Louisiana Purchase. And we can't settle it because every time we try, the Lakota or the Comanche kick the shit out of us. So we should send a bunch of Central Europeans and Eastern Europeans over there and let them get in the middle of it. And so in all of these, and you can look up, if you were to put it into the computer, you can pull up all of these pamphlets they would put out and ads they would put out in newspapers in Romania and Norway, obviously Ireland, did it everywhere, Germany, and said, come, free land.
Yeah.
Come get your free land. And when I started researching it, there were people that would come from areas where it was against the law to swim. They were not allowed to swim.
Wow.
No one knew how to swim.
It was against the law to swim.
Against the law to swim.
What the fuck? That seems so insane. What seems so insane, what really struck me, I mean, I did a lot of thinking about that show last night. Like it ended, I did my binge. I ended the binge at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And, at nighttime I do some of my most fucked up thinking because everyone is asleep in my house. It's just me. And I generally do most of my writing when everyone's asleep. And I was just thinking, that's 140 years ago. That's nothing. I'm 56 years old. When I was in high school, it was in 1983. So that was 100 years ago. I was a sophomore in high school. So 100 years is nothing. 100 years before that, you make your way across the country on a fucking wagon and you get free land.
Yeah.
100 years. That's so short a period of time. It's so hard for us to really appreciate how recent that is. And how fucking insane the change in this country over such a short period of time has been.
Meteoric.
Nothing
I just
like
read
it.
something in the last day or two that, and I'm going to get it wrong, but 1937 is closer to 1984 than 2023 is to 84 or something like that.
Yeah.
And if you think about the gap between 1984 and 2023 and then what 84 was like, I was alive, you were alive, to now, it doesn't seem like that dramatic a change. Obviously there is internet, but you still had cars, you had phones, you couldn't take them with you, but you had them. But 1937, we haven't even made penicillin yet.
Right.
That's just 40 years.
Yeah, trench warfare.
Yeah.
Yeah. World War I.
Yeah. No, these they came over here, they didn't speak the language. They knew nothing about the land, knew nothing about the water, it did, by the way, you can be rest assured it did not say in that advertisement in the Romanian Times, there's other people who already live there who will kill you when you show up. It didn't mention any of that. They didn't hear about the Indians till they got to Galveston. And, they're buying their supplies. You need a gun? What do you need a gun? Well, the Indians. The who? What are you talking about? Who are Indians? Well, you're going to find out.
Yeah, that was a part of Empire of the Summer Moon, that these folks had just established these homesteads and had no idea. And the Comanches would show up and just slaughter them. They had no idea. They had no idea that there was even a concern, and they had to figure it out along the way.
Yeah. And, and you read in that book, and from a military standpoint, it's just an impressive achievement that Nakona decided he was going to raid all the way to Galveston. And he marched through, burned Austin, went all the way to Galveston. Everybody got on their boats, went out on their boats and watched him burn Galveston. Then they went in and looted all the stores and found these parasols. You could sit there and block the sun. And the Comanche thought, that's the freaking smartest thing. I wish we'd had fabric to do that with. So all the braves took these parachutes. And when they rode off, there's thousands of Comanche warriors with parasols of all these different colors, blocks getting the sun off their shoulders.
Running away with umbrellas.
Yeah.
That's insane.
But what a terrifying visual that would be.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I had no idea until I read Empire of the Summer Moon. And then I had the author come in. What is his name again? S.G. Gwen? Is that it? Great fucking guy. And he found out when he moved to Texas. Like he moved here and then was researching Texas history. S.C. Gwen. And when he moved here and he was researching Texas, then he was like, oh my God, like how do I not know about all this? How do I not know what this happened? How do I not know about the Texas Rangers and how they were established and why they needed them and what went down?
Yeah, it was the Wild West.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the reasons why Texas is such a crazy place. It's like this was kind of the last stand.
Yeah, and Texas was its own nation for 14
Yeah.
years, 13 years, and it's still that independence is still pretty embedded in it.
Yeah, they want to put it back on the ballot
Every year. I mean, it just decimated. I think cholera killed 60% of the Comanche.
Yeah, they said that 90% of the people killed in North America were killed by diseases. 90% of the Native Americans.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that story hasn't been told properly. And that's what I really appreciated about 1883. It's like you talked about, I mean, this was like the end of the Native American Empire, essentially. This was when there was still a little bit of buffalo left. There's still, they were moving Indians to reservations. Then the Indians that were out, they were resisting it, and it's just, and then these people are trying to make their way in this fucking wagon train across the country. What percentage of those people died that were trying to do that?
I mean, I don't know that there's anywhere along the Oregon Trail you can drive along, or there's markers just everywhere, and especially the further up you get into Wyoming, and the further you start getting through like the Lander Cutoff and South Pass, then they're just, and that's the ones that that got a marker.
Yeah.
So it's, how do you know?
Right.
The handcart. The Mormon Church brought a lot of people out, and they didn't have a lot of money, enough money to give them full wagons, even though that's what they'd promised. So they made these handcarts that people would pull from wherever they took off from, somewhere in Ohio, to try and get to Utah. And so these people pulled them by hand. They'd put their wife and their gear, their kids or whatever, and then they'd pull them, these two-wheeled carts, like chariots without a horse. And one winter they left too late and got caught in the winter. And the whole trick was, if you didn't make it to this certain spot in Wyoming by July 4th, you were not going to make it. You were going to get caught in the pass and you're going to die. And something like 25,000 people died in 1 year. Just mind-numbing statistics.
Insane.
Yeah.
Insane. And it's so interesting that the early films on the West, they never covered that. The early films in the West were like these really sort of shallow surface films that were fun movies, cowboys versus Indians, the spaghetti westerns and that kind of stuff. But no one had any sort of real understanding of what actually went down.
No, you didn't. The notion of getting free land that you could go farm with, by the way, nothing. You're going to go somewhere with nothing. Like, there's no stores. You're going to have to make everything. You have to figure it all out on your own. Who would choose that? Not a successful blacksmith. Not somebody that's got a nice, comfortable home in Maryland or wherever. And why? Why would you do that? You have to have no other option.
Right.
Right? All the people that came over from whatever European nation they came from, they didn't come for an adventure.
Right.
They came because they were fucking starving. My family came over from Ireland because of the potato famine. They didn't want to. They had to.
Right.
They were dying. So they had to come. So that's why everyone came. Desperation. Like, desperation is what settled the West. Fueled by a manifest destiny, which was a cruel, very cruel, insidious idea that a bunch of politicians had that says, hey, we can either send the army out there and just go to war. And we've been doing that, and we've been getting the shit handed to us because the Lakota were, until the repeating rifle came around, the Lakota and the Comanche, the Arapaho, even the South, we did not have their skill level on a horse. their arrows were actually more effective than our single shot muskets. Like they were a superior army, and stayed that way. It wasn't until we started sacking villages when the Braves were gone, when their soldiers were gone, when that dirty shit started, then it started turning the tide. And then when we killed the food source, that was the end of it.
Yeah, which is part of the wiping out of the buffalo.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a commodity for sure, but it was also, there was a concerted effort to cut off their food source.
But it was also, there was a demand. The buffalo tongue was the number one delicacy in New York City.
Isn't that crazy?
The tongue.
Which nobody wants anymore.
No. And then they sold all the buffalo skins to France, and they made giant, massive, silly robes.
Well, at one point in time, one of the richest men in the world was, he dealt in beaver pelts.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
There was fucking beaver everywhere. They wiped out most of the beaver in this country.
Yeah. But they've come back.
Yeah, they've come back,
Yeah.
but not nearly to where they were.
No, but they've come back. It's pretty impressive how much they've come back. And because you'll get what they call the movie flu, where you just get run down. The hours are, it's 14, 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then
you have deadlines and you have a budget and you have to do it that way.
I mean, the budget. We have a budget, but you've seen my shows. They let me run. So I have
the CGI in 1883. I was like, this is insane, because I don't want to give anything away, but there's a scene with a storm where you're like, oh my god, like you can do some wild shit today.
Well, the other thing is, yes, but the other thing is, I waited till a day with 60-mile-an-hour winds to shoot that.
Oh, perfect.
I let God do a lot of the CGI.
Nice.
They're like, there's a terrible storm coming in, and I said,
go.
Let's swip the schedule.
Yeah, because there's no way you could ever have done that with their hair and all the things flying around.
Yeah. It was
fucking
nuts.
great, man. It's a great show.
How about that ending?
It was rough. Like I was just walking around my house for like 2 hours afterwards.
And the funny thing is, I told the audience what was going to happen in the first scene.
Yeah, I know, that was a wild thing you did. Yeah, it's like you're waiting for it throughout all the episodes. There's only 10, so you're like, how does this go down? It definitely added a layer of anticipation. It's brilliant, man. It really is. It's one of the best shows I've ever seen.
And I shot 70% of it, 80% of it at the 4.6s.
How the fuck is Tim McGraw and Faith Hill so good?
That's crazy, isn't it?
How are they so good at acting?
Well, let me tell you what. Every singer can act, just like every comedian can act.
Dude, he's fucking incredible.
Did you ever see him in Friday Night Lights, the movie?
No.
That film and I know Pete Berg came on the show with you here. Pete was a big mentor of mine, and that to me is a perfect sports film. It's fun. If you haven't seen that movie, you got to see that movie. It's Billy Bob Thornton, and Tim McGraw plays this abusive dad in it, and it is. I mean, he's raw, but he's the well runs deep with that guy.
Well, you can tell in that movie, man, or in your show rather, you just 100% buy that he is a stone cold killer.
Yeah, and Faith, she hadn't acted before.
Incredible.
We were just hoping.
Incredible.
And she brought it.
Incredible.
Yeah.
But also it has to help that they're a real life married couple. There's real, there's like layers of chemistry when they're on the set together.
And the subtext and it was.
And the heavy moments, I don't want to give anything away, but some of the heavy moments between the two of them, you're like, oh my God, imagine dealing with that. The fucking shit those people had to deal with.
It's insanity.
It's heavy, dude. It's a heavy show, but it's really good. And I think it's a really important thing for people to be aware of, that's a pretty, it's obviously fiction, but it's a pretty accurate representation of how it went down.
Yeah, I mean, the circumstances are imaginary, but the tools and the things, I mean, that's how they died and that's how they lived.